Hello everyone. Okay, let's go. Normally we are starting. I hope you're getting me. Okay, good. Here we go. Right. I hope everything's working well. Apparently it is. So, hey, good morning. How are you doing? Right, that's fine. It's working. Okay. So, hello everybody. Right, it's a pleasure to have you here again. Okay, we're getting closer every day to coming back to real school. So, according to the last pieces of information we have, it should come at some point. Okay, so I hope everybody's doing well. I hope that you have had a good weekend, and we still have 2 months to go anyway, whatever form it takes to complete this year. Okay, so I'm sure that currently you're wondering if you will get a French oral and so on, but that's something we still don't know yet, including us, right? Including teachers. We don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, so let's get into some history. So I intend to teach you a class from 9:30 to approximately 11 today. Maybe I will finish earlier. In that case, it's fine. On this picture, on this slide, hello everybody, hello. On this slide, we have the plan of the lesson we started last week. Okay, on last Monday. Just a full reminder for everybody, okay, to refresh everybody's memories. The lesson we have started is a lesson which is supposed to focus on the situation in Europe in the second half of the 19th century and early 20th century. And the situation in Europe at that time was determined by three questions, three problems, issues, changes, transformations. Three transformations that actually had a strong impact on European history and European situation. The first one is the one we've started discussing last week, and we're going to complete today, which is the impact of the national feeling on the creation of new states, or if you prefer, the impact of nationalism as a system of thought on the creation of new states. Last week we discussed how Italy was created, and we showed that Italy actually was not only led by a popular movement, but it was more the Italians uniting behind the king of Sardinia, right? And the fact that it took wars for Italy to become a united state, a united country. But we also said that this was not enough for the Italians to become a real nation, and that's something we will discuss in the third part. The second problem, so the creation of new states due to the national feeling, and today we're going to study Germany and how Germany was created as a state. The second problem of this period is the question of political changes. The fact that Europe, some countries in Europe became more democratic in the second half of the 19th century. And the fact that they became more democratic means that there was a kind of confrontation between democratizing regimes and authoritarian regimes, and that would create tensions. And so that's the second major change in Europe at that time. The third one, and that would be the last part, is the economic changes and the fact that there was more and more rivalry between the states due to industrialization, due to colonization, Okay, and that's the third major element, the competition between states at the end of the century that led more or less to the First World War. Okay, that's the general structure of the lesson. This lesson is supposed, I hope it will, but it's supposed to give you all the factors that led to World War I. Okay, good. So to be precisely back to our current study, and the first part which I intend to finish today, the fact that new states were created and the fact that these new states were at the center of the diplomatic tensions and problems and eventually confrontations in Europe. The first part was about Italian unity. And I say it was an unfinished process because even when Italy was created as a state, the Italians still had to work on their identity as Italians. And I will explain you this in the very last part of the lesson. The second part is today about German unity. And we'll see that German unity was clearly something you can call a top-down construction. Or to say it differently, that actually the people in Germany played a minor part compared to the role played by politicians. And especially two politicians, the King of Prussia, King William, and his Prime Minister, Otto von Bismarck. And we'll see today that this man, Bismarck, was responsible for building a strong Germany. So I'm just going to show you a map immediately so you can identify this. Okay. As you can see, the German Reich, the German Empire, eventually was resurrected. There was something called the Holy Roman German Empire until Napoleon. It had disappeared and it was recreated. And it was recreated by uniting all the German states. And the question we have is, what is a German state and who should be part of Germany? And that's something we're going to discuss today. And the fact that to do this, Bismarck had to wage several wars. One against Austria, one against France, and that the process of uniting Germany was made by one part of Germany called Prussia. Okay? Right. So, let's work on this. And to do that, I would like to, so it's part 2, okay? Sorry, I show you the structure of the lesson again. So, it's still part 1. New states, new regimes, new political projects. And it's paragraph 2, German unity, a top-down imperial construction. Okay. Once we've studied this, and that will be for the second part of the lesson today, the second part of the class today, we'll focus on how Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, who would soon become Napoleon III, how he played a role in the diplomatic changes in Europe, by supporting the Italian unity, by also being a kind of victim to some extent, by being a victim of the German unity, because as you certainly know, there was a French-German war in 1870 that led to the victory of Germany and the departure of Napoleon III. Okay, so today we complete this part. Right. Okay, let's start from here if you're okay with that. Because that's going to be a way to revise the question of nationalism. Okay? And in case you're looking for examples for the key term nationalism, this works because you can see that the text we're going to study dates back to 1841. So it belongs to the period under study for your nationalism key term. This is a text which was written by a man called August Hoffmann in 1841, so just before our period. And this text is called Das Lied der Deutschen, the Song of the Germans. And today, the third stanza, the one that started by Einigkeit und Recht und Freiheit, is the official anthem of Germany. It's still the official anthem of Germany today. So what you've got in front of you is a kind of equivalent of German equivalent to La Marseillaise or God Save the Queen. It's the national anthem. And the music, when you listen to the music, it was written by composer Joseph Haydn, right? And let's read this, and I'm going to explain you why it's a very useful document if you want to work on the question of nationalism. So I will read it in English. There are some German speakers among you, but it's easier maybe in English. But the first line is very famous, right? Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. Germany, Germany above all the world. When for protection and defense, it always stands brotherly together. From the mouse to the mammal, from the adage to the belt, Germany, Germany above all in the world. German women, German loyalty, German wine and German song shall retain in the world their old beautiful time, and inspires to noble deeds during all our life. Unity and justice and freedom for the German fatherland. Towards this let us strive brotherly with heart and hand. Unity and justice and freedom are the safeguards of fortune. Flourish in the radiance of this fortune, flourish German fatherland. So, this song, this anthem, was written at a time when Germany was not united at all. When we go back to a map I've shown you last week, but maybe we should go back to it if it's working. Sorry, I need to upload it. If you remember, I don't know if you remember this, but Germany was under Napoleon's domination, and Napoleon the First, okay, Napoleon the Emperor, the one that ruled until 1814. Napoleon invaded Germany, and he destroyed the former German Empire. Which means that, to say differently, in 1841, when the anthem was written, Germany was like this. That is, Germany was totally split and divided in multiple states. You can see how complicated a map it was. Okay, right, that's it. If you look at this map, that's Germany in the middle of the 19th century. At the moment when the anthem was written, when the lyrics to the anthem were written, actually Germany did not exist. Germany did not exist as a single state. Napoleon's invasion had more or less simplified the map of Germany, but it was still totally, it was like a jigsaw puzzle of, tens of different states. Okay? So, what is quite interesting in this anthem, which was written at a moment when Germany was totally divided, okay, is that it says a lot about what nationalism was. Yes, I'm going to discuss, I'm not going to tackle it, but I'm just going to mention the German Confederation. But my aim is not to study necessarily all the process of the different steps of German construction. It's more a way to show you how you turn from, I will mention the German Confederation. It's more a way to show what the different steps between an idea, a project, and the achievement of this project was. So yes, I will mention whatever necessary steps are, and the German Confederation is one part of them. Firstly, if you remember, a nation is an imaging community, you remember? And if you look at the quotation, you can see that Germans stand brotherly together. And if you remember, I've told you this when we studied this question, that a nation is a kind of imaging family. Everybody's brother and sister, because a nation is like a family, but an imagined one. And at that time, clearly, Germans could hardly know each other for one reason. Some of them were living in the south of Europe, in northern Italy, for example. Some of them were living more in Austria. Some of them were living in today's Russia and Belarus, so very east of Europe. Okay? Another example, which is a reference to German women, German wine, German song. That's also the fact that you share a family, you share a culture too. And this imaging community is not that much imaging, it's the German speaking community. When they say German song, that's a way to say the German language, the German music of words. Finally, the word brotherly is also used in the last stanza. So the Germans felt that they were living with a common culture, and this common culture was the German language. But if you look at the first line, it reads Germany, Germany above all in the world. And there are two ways of reading these words. The first way is to say that the first aim of the Germans is to live in Germany. So one way to read this is to read it like, we want to have one Germany before anything else. Okay? Is it Deutschland or Germany as a country? Is the aim Germany as a country? Or is the aim Germany as a country above the others? You see that Deutschland über alles, it has two meanings. Can be Germany as a united country before anything else. The first aim we have is Germany as a country. Or Germany above the countries. And that's the two forms of nationalism. You remember? There are two forms or various degrees of nationalism. The first degree is to say we want to live together, and because we form a nation. The second degree is more, we want to be superior to the others. And maybe you can, I'm just concluding on this, maybe you can understand why today, and after World War II, the first stanza was abandoned. Today when people sing the German anthem, they tend not to sing the first stanza because Deutschland über alles has had a different meaning in World War II when Germany was dominating Europe. Okay? So, it's a very nationalist song because it wants to unite all the Germans. And if you look at this, that's my third point, it refers to the German fatherland, and from the Meuse is in France, to the Memel is in Belarus, from the Adige, and the Adige is in Italy, to the Belt, and the Belt is in Denmark. So it means that Germany should go from France to Russia, to Denmark, to Italy. And this is what you call pan-Germanism. Everywhere there are Germans, that should be Germany. And Pan-Germanism is the project by which all Germans should be united. During World War II and under Nazism, right, this project remained. So please take care. Let us be clear on this. I am not saying that Nazism was rooted in the 19th century and that Nazism had to happen because from the very beginning all the Germans wanted to live together. I'm not saying this. I'm saying that when Adolf Hitler had this project of conquering new territories so he could gather all the Germans, that was not a new project. That was not new. That was already appearing. Look at this. That was already appearing in an 1841 song, which is a nationalist song and would become later on the anthem for Germany. Okay? Finally, if you remember, nationalism is about a common destiny. You remember this? A nation is supposed to share a common future, a common project. It appears in this song. This German feeling, and that's the end of the second stanza, it inspires us to noble deeds during all of our life. Okay, we want to make common things together, unity and justice and freedom. And that's a common project for the Germans. Okay? I have used this for two reasons. Firstly, because that can give you some elements to answer questions about nationalism and what it is, and that gives you a perfect illustration of how you create a national feeling. Okay, writing songs, writing poems, that's something I've already told you. Think of Lord Byron writing poems about the Greek War of Independence and so on. So writing songs, writing poems that people will learn and repeat and sing together. That's a way to create a common feeling. But also, because the way I've taught the lesson is, okay, one lesson ending in 1848 and the second lesson starting in 1848, there is a continuity between both periods. Don't forget this, right? It's not because history teachers teach lesson that have a beginning and an end that in history there is a beginning and an end, right? It's just a continuous process. Okay? Good. Is that clear? Is that clear what I'm explaining here? Please, if you have questions, do not hesitate. Now the question is, how do you achieve such unity? How do you achieve such unity when the reality is this? When the reality is that the German in Europe were living in multiple states, right? And they were separate. They were separated, from each other due to the borders. One man and one project would lead the way. And sorry for this. Right. Okay. This is Otto from Bismarck. And this is one of the most famous speeches by Otto von Bismarck. It was delivered in 1862. So at the bottom you have a portrait of Otto. At the moment, right? It must be from 1860 or whatever. So, just a quick presentation. Who was Otto von Bismarck? He was a German politician. And as you can maybe guess from the von word, von means he was a noble. He was from Prussia and Prussia was the largest kingdom in Germany. Okay? If you remember this, and that's something that Otto von Bismarck is referring to in his speech, in 1848-49, during the European Spring of Nations, you remember these risings in Europe? The Germans had started trying to unite. And it was a failure, and it was mostly a failure because there was a resistance by the Emperor of Austria. In Austria, you had plenty of German-speaking people, and the Emperor of Austria was an absolutist emperor, and he didn't want new states being created under, more liberal visions, more democratic visions. More liberal is better. So, the situation of Germany after the European Spring is that it still was divided. But you had several big states. Prussia was one of them. So maybe showing you a map with the help. Right. If you look at this. So, sorry, it's not that map. I made a mistake. I need to show you another map, which must be here. Okay, this one. Good. Right. Sorry. I'm sorry for this. Right. You see, that's the final result. The map you have in front of you, right, is the final result. Okay? It means it's after Germany had been united. But if you look at this, you can see that south of Germany, you've got the Austrian Empire. I don't know if you can see that, but you've got the Austrian Empire, and you had German-speaking population here. You had the Kingdom of Prussia, and you can see that the Kingdom of Prussia was more located on the east of Germany, but also having some territories in the west, with Scotland, for example. You've got the Kingdom of Saxony, you've got the Kingdom of Bavaria, and so on. What would happen in the 1860s? The Kingdom of Prussia would be the leading kingdom to unite Germany. But listen to me. There were two tendencies in Germany. People were more inspired by the liberal vision of a nation. Clearly, for example, people in the north of Germany, people in Hanover, or people in Hesse, which is in the west, you can see it on the map, that were more favorable, to building Germany by a kind of contract between liberal regimes. And that would form a kind of liberal federation. These people were more, let's say, liberal. And you had a conservative tendency, and that was Otto von Bismarck, who said, yes, Germans have to be united, but democracy or liberalism is not the best way to obtain the German unity. German unity will be obtained by a stronger process. A stronger process is a way to say, under some authoritarian or under some strong regime. And that was his position. Let's read the speech he delivered in 1862. Germany is not looking to Prussia's liberalism, but to its power. Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden may indulge liberalism, they may defend, promote, they may want liberalism. And for that reason, no one will assign them Prussia's role. Prussia has to coalesce and concentrate its power for the opportune moment, which has already been missed several times. Prussia's borders, according to the Vienna Congress, the Vienna Treaties, are not favorable for a healthy, vital state. And the last sentence is the most famous by Otto von Bismarck. It is not by speeches and majority resolution that the great question of the time are decided. That was the big mistake of the European Spring, but by iron and blood. So clearly, and that's a way to put it clear for you, Otto von Bismarck defended that Prussia, the Kingdom of Prussia, should take the leading role in building Germany. And as you can see, building Germany will not be a process of discussing and speeches and majority resolution. A majority resolution is called democracy, right? It will be made by iron, weapons, and blood, wars. Okay? So Bismarck considered that, and it is the role of, sorry, my bad. That's it. It is the role of Prussia to unite Germany. It is the role of Prussia to unite Germany, right? And uniting Germany will take wars. If you look at this map, the very map you have in front of your eyes, if you look at this, okay, you can see that Prussia started expanding to the east. To the east, if you look at Danzig on this map, and if you look at Russia and Poland, you can see that part of Prussia was already taken to the east. So, because you had German living there and German principalities and duchies, Prussia started making war there. And they integrated some eastern territories to Prussia. Now, second step, what would the other German states do? If you look at this map, you can see that, for example, that's very easy to see. If you are the kingdom of Saxony, you see the Saxony? It's Dresden, right? If you look at Saxony on this map. If you are the kingdom or a duchy, of Mecklenburg, okay? You are border states to Prussia, you are the neighbors of Prussia, and the risk is that Prussia would invade you to unite to Prussia. You see it? Like, you feel the pressure, you feel the threat of Prussia. So what was the solution for them? There were three solutions. I'm sorry, I know it's a bit complicated, but I want you to understand this. Either they accepted the domination of Prussia, and so they could be swallowed by Prussia, and then little by little Prussia would become Germany. So it's not Germany, it's a larger Prussia, a great Prussia. That's the first possibility. Secondly, they could accept to form a federation with Prussia, like remain more or less independent or autonomous, but in a German federation. They had a third solution. The third solution was to say, after all, we have a German emperor already. It's the Austrian emperor. Because if you look at Austria, it had a major German population. And globally, this is exactly the three solutions that existed to have a united Germany. Either you would accept being swallowed by Prussia, and then Prussia, a large Prussia, would be Germany. Or you would create a German federation, but with Prussia as a stronger state. Or you could join Austria. Because there was a German emperor already, was the Austrian emperor. Okay? Let me show you a very interesting article which was published, because I think it's quite interesting to show you that this matter was discussed in... sorry, I need to integrate one more picture. It's coming. Here we are. Okay. That's quite interesting. Because, sorry for this. Okay. This article is interesting because the source is interesting. It's on the New York Times website. You can still find it today, right? And it's an article that dates back to 1866. So it's an American newspaper, okay, which is describing and trying to explain to its lectorate, to the readers, what is the situation in Germany in 1866. And at that time, 1866, Prussia was at war against Austria. And the war between Prussia and Austria was a war of what state should be leading the unification of Germany. Should it be Prussia and Bismarck, or should it be the Emperor of Austria? So you can see that it was not clear in 1866 if Germany should be united under Prussia or should be united under Austria. To say it differently, you had two states that claimed being Germany, if you prefer. That's a different way to put it. Let's say this. So the article goes like this. There is, in political geography, no Germany proper to speak of. There are kingdoms and grand duchies and principalities inhabited by Germans, and each separately ruled by an independent sovereign with all the machinery of state. So that's a reminder of the situation of Germany with plenty of different states. Okay? Clear? Yet, there is a natural undercurrent tending to a national feeling, exactly with the anthem we have studied before, and toward the union of the Germans into one great nation, ruled by one common head as a national unit. Okay? That's the project. And look at this. I like what they do here. This feeling dates as far back into antiquity as the days of Hermann, where all the German tribes united under him against the Roman invasion under Varro. So they date the German nation back to the Roman times. Okay, they say, remember, we the Germans, we resisted the Roman Empire like 2,000 years ago. And this is what created the national feeling. Imagine community once again. You remember a fantasized past. Like, oh, we already were Germans 2,000 years ago when we resisted the Germans. It also culminated in the Christian era after Charlemagne in an elective empire, which for many centuries represented a consolidated Germany in the political world. So we want to restore the German Empire that existed in the Middle Ages. Then I've skipped some text. The fall of Napoleon necessitated the reconstruction of the political status of Germany. However, at the Congress of Vienna, Metternich, which we've already mentioned, he strove to resuscitate the unity of Germany of old under the imperial head of Francis. And Francis was the Emperor of Austria. Okay? But the new kings would not consent to abdicate their sovereign rights and become, as the electors were, vassals to a supreme emperor, nor would the most powerful of them, Prussia, consent to a revival of the old state of things. What does that mean? That the Congress of Vienna, which we've already mentioned, created a situation which is exactly the one I've described a few minutes ago. Either Prussia would take the lead in Germany, or Germany would remain just a federation, but that means no unity, or the unity could come under the Emperor of Austria. Okay? So you see, it's almost a bit different from Italy. In Germany, the national feeling was clear. In Germany, the national feeling was there. There was a feeling of what it meant to be German, much more than there was a feeling of what it meant to be Italian. But the problem is, how should German unity be achieved? And that could only come, and this is what would happen, that came from a confrontation between Prussia and Austria. Okay? Am I being clear here? Is that clear what I'm telling you? If you have questions, please really do not hesitate, because I know that there is plenty of information here that you need to tackle and to remember, but that's it. Okay? So, the problem is that in Italy, the solution came rather quickly, because only the Kingdom of Sardinia was strong enough to achieve Italian unity, whereas in Germany there was a competition, and this competition would eventually be completed and achieved, by war. And this is why you have, sorry for this, my bad. This is why you have this. Can I put it very clearly? In 1862, Bismarck said, in his own words, that only war could achieve German unity. That there was not a chance of having German unity made by discussions and negotiations between Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, Austria. Only iron and blood could do that. And that's a lesson he drew from the failure of the European Spring in 1848-49. So when someone tells you only iron and blood can get German independence, you know what's going to happen? War. And actually, wars would come in two steps. Step one, war against Austria, and then France, globally. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just getting rid of some documents and including others. I'm sorry for this. No, that's one. Here we go. Here we go with this. Right. Okay. So, if you look at this map, this is the result. This is the result. In 1871, 9 years only, after Otto von Bismarck's speech, like we should use iron and blood to achieve German unity, the German unity was done. This is the final result. How was it done? Firstly, it was done by territories conquered in a war against Austria. If you look at this map, you can see that some territories were conquered against Austria. For example, if you look at the north of Germany, territories called Schleswig-Holstein, right? And that was won when the Prussians defeated the Austrians. Because actually some states in Germany were more willing to join the Austrians than Prussia. And those states were defeated too when the Prussians defeated Austria in the Austro-Prussian War. And there was a huge defeat by the Austrian army. It's called Sadowa in 1866. That forced Austria to sign a kind of treaty with Germany. That led to the creation in 1867, as you can see it, of a German confederation. Here we go, Kenzo, that's your answer. What was it, the German confederation? It was a way for some kingdoms and duchies to maintain some autonomy, especially the Kingdom of Saxony, to maintain some autonomy and to maintain some, kind of balance of power with Prussia. But the fact there was a German confederation means that the German unity was now started being created more in the favor of Prussia than in the favor of Austria. And the final step was a war against France. And the war against France led to Alsace and Lorraine being integrated to the German Reich. Why was there a war with France? That's something we will discuss in the third part. So clearly, the speech made by Bismarck about iron and blood clearly led Prussia to become the leader of the German unification, by making war to Austria, making war to the German states that refused Prussia's leadership, war to France, okay. And so iron and blood was not just they were not just words. That was the reality of the policy led by Bismarck. So it's really a unity in Germany made mostly by war, more than diplomacy, actually. The conclusion was this. The conclusion was in 1871, the unification of Germany, of the Great Reich, of the Great Empire, reached by this very symbolic event, which is the proclamation of the German Empire and German Emperor in Versailles. So let's focus on this painting because it's quite interesting. This painting was painted, I think might be 1878 or something like this, a bit later. So I will answer your question, Rita, in 1 second. Well, actually, I'm going to answer it right now. Kenzo, that was discussed in the previous lesson. That's something I mentioned in the previous lesson, the German Confederation, the post-Napoleonic Confederation. But that was not exactly the same. And actually, it was a confederation that failed to unite in 1848 during the European Spring. Okay? So, to answer Rita's question, why not voting? Because not all German states not all German states had adopted constitutions. Not all German states were using liberal and democratic institutions. Actually, there was a huge variety of constitution in the various duchies and kingdoms and grand duchies and principalities. And the question of voting meant that one believed in the democratic principle. I mean, when you vote, you have to consider that there is a majority and a minority. But when it comes to uniting your country, when it comes to uniting your principality, uniting your duchy, uniting your kingdom to a larger empire, it's not a matter of majority and minority. It has to be a matter of consensus. Okay, so I understand your question and it's a relevant one, but there was no chance that uniting in a German empire might have been done by vote. Because if you want to unite to another country, if you want to belong to an empire, if you accept to belong to an empire, it's not a question of, 10 states have decided we should create an empire, 8 have decided not to, and force the 8 that said no to integrate the empire. They will resist. And when they resist, you need to make war. That's exactly what Bismarck was aware of. Bismarck knew some German states could not be convinced to unite Germany. So you had to force them. The Emperor of Austria would never have accepted to abandon his own German state to a larger Germany. So voting would have led to nothing. Okay, let me use a comparison, Rita, if you want. If I'm the Bismarck of history teaching and I consider you need to do a test immediately after we go back to school, okay? That's my project. And then we vote all together. I'm sure most of you will vote against having a test when we go back to school. So voting is useless. If I want to make a test, let's do it by force. Let's impose it by maybe not iron and blood, because it's not a matter of iron and blood to have a test, but you know what I mean? There might be a paradox here. The paradox is, if there was a German feeling of being a nation, why couldn't they agree on this? Because the national feeling which existed was also opposed to a feeling that to the defense of local interest. If you're the king of Saxony, maybe you feel German, but you know that if there is a united Germany, you will lose your kingship. Maybe if you live in a Grand Duchy, or if you live in a principality, you feel German. But if you rule over this principality or duchy and a German empire is being created, you will lose all your power. You see, that's why a confederation, and I'm going to go back to what Kenzo asked. This is why a confederation, what is a confederation? Confederation is a voluntary gathering of nations willing to live together but retaining a lot of autonomy. It means that you adhere voluntarily. You voluntarily become a member of a confederation, but no one is dominating the confederation. Everybody is on equal footing in a confederation, whereas in an empire, there is an emperor. So there is someone above all the other leaders. You see? So it's very hard to vote to abandon your own capacity to rule. And that's why voting was not a possibility to unite Germany. You had too many kings and dukes and archdukes that were willing to retain their own power. Okay? Right. Okay. It's okay. Don't worry, Kenzo. It's not a problem. So that's it. That's it. Okay. Look at this. Can we look at this painting very, very briefly, because it's already okay. It's already 10:30, and I want to say a few words about Napoleon III and his role in Europe to complete this. If you look at this painting, the place it's taking, where it's happening, is very important. It is happening in the Palace of Versailles in France in January 1871. So it means that the German emperor, that you can recognize, that's the German emperor. Sorry, I'm just going to zoom in. Okay, the German emperor is there with a white mustache, and he's standing, and he's just under the flags. Okay, is the one on the pedestal, right? You can see a guy in white with a white uniform. It's in the center of the picture, and that's Bismarck. So why is he in the center of the picture? Because the painter certainly considered that he was the most instrumental person, the most important person in uniting Germany. So the guy on the man on the pedestal, right, is being crowned with the white mustache. Is King William of Prussia, now becoming Emperor of Prussia, Emperor of Germany, sorry. And why was it done in Versailles? Because the unity of the Reich was made after the French Emperor Napoleon III had been defeated by the Germans. You know why we've got something called the Traité de Versailles in 1918? Because for France, signing the end of World War I against Germany in the Galerie des Glaces in Palais de Versailles, Château de Versailles, was a way to erase the humiliation of having a German emperor crowned and proclaimed in the Galerie des Glaces in 1871. And if you look at the right-hand side of the painting, you have all these German kings and dukes and archdukes and princes and whatever title they have, proclaiming the emperor by raising their swords and helmets. And that's a way to prove, and Rita, that's another way to answer your question. That's a way to prove that the German emperor was proclaimed exactly as the medieval kings or emperors would be proclaimed. It's not a people's choice. It's not people's choice. It's the choice of force, the choice of military superiority, the choice of royal power imposing to a nation. Okay? That really dates back to early Middle Ages, right? Even actually, it's coming back to the Roman Empire. At the time where Roman emperors were proclaimed, they were put on a shield, and they were raised like victors, like winners. This is exactly the meaning of the word imperator, the one that wins war. So here you've got a reference to this. What I mean is that, I'm sorry to insist on this, but this has very little to do with a national feeling. This has a lot to do with power, military power, capacity to win wars, capacity to have a strong diplomacy, capacity to unite behind power. Not the national feeling has little to do with this. Okay? Yeah, absolutely, Pierre, that's true. So I will explain this in the next lesson, but this is why there was something called La Commune in Paris. You've certainly heard of this left-wing movement, people's movement called the Commune of Paris. And that was done because when Napoleon III was defeated in Sedan in 1870, Paris was supposed to be an open city to the Germans. We call this ville ouverte in French, open city. What does that mean? That a city stops resisting an enemy. Okay? And the Republican government that replaced Napoleon III decided that Paris should be an open city, and the population of Paris refused this. And they refused this because they had this patriotic feeling and they didn't want to let the Germans parade over Paris. So there was this left-wing movement, La Commune. It was a kind of communist movement, and as you certainly know, it was crushed by the Republican government, and eventually it means that the Germans could occupy Paris, and absolutely they marched down the Champs-Élysées, and they marched down, actually they occupied Paris. Okay, so I will discuss this in the third part, actually, and I will explain you exactly what happened during La Commune de Paris. So as a way, so that's why actually Thiers and the Republican government was found shelter in Versailles. And La Commune de Paris is a confrontation between les Versaillais, that is the conservative and authoritarian, more or less authoritarian government. It's a conservative Republican government with Adolphe Thiers, and opposed to les communards. And that means the people resisting in Paris, and that would end in a bloodbath, right? Okay. I just would like to add one last thing, and I swear I'm done with the German unity. But why do many people? Why do you have such a critical vision of nationalism? Among historians and among people who work on the history of Europe. Because when you use the concept of nation and this concept of national feeling and national identity and a kind of cement between the people, I am not saying it does not exist. Okay? No one is saying that a nation does not exist. Just that a nation is actually something which is a myth. And as in all myth, there is something true. But if you look at the German unity, and the German unity, I'm sorry for this, I would like to choose this. Okay. When you look at the German unity, the way the German Reich was assembled, it was not assembled because people wanted to live together as Germans. I mean, I'm not saying people didn't want to live together as Germans. Maybe they wanted, and there was certainly a popular movement for this. But this is not what made Germany. What made Germany is war. And war made under the authority of the Prussian kingdom. And clearly, the national feeling among Germans was a tool for Prussia to impose its power, because in the end, what happened? Who was the emperor of Prussia? The emperor of Germany. It was the king of Prussia. Who became the chancellor, the prime minister of the emperor of Germany? The chancellor of Prussia, Bismarck. So, can I put this differently? The national feeling that existed in Germany, the one we've studied with the national anthem. Sorry, my bad. This. Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. Okay. Brotherly together. Wow, brotherly, yes, ma'am. So it's a sibling rivalry, right? Brotherly, because there are so much brothers that they had to make war. And they have to unite all the Germans by making war. But in the end, from the Meuse to the Memel, from the Adige to the Belt, that is from France to Russia, from Italy to Denmark, oh yes, it worked. Yes, it worked. Yes, it was done. Look at this. Italy, Denmark, Russia, France, this is exactly where the German Empire would go. And so this will to assemble of the Germans was actually achieved by Bismarck and Emperor William, right? But it also was an alibi for them to increase Prussia's power. That's a fact. That's a fact. And you know what happened? Once Germany was unified, what can you do with Germany above all? It's not uniting Germany. It's making Germany the most powerful state in Europe. And at the moment when German unity was achieved, the Emperor of Germany started looking for faster industrialization of Germany, and on a longer term, industrialization led to the will of Germany to impose itself as a power, and that would lead to Germany looking for colonies, and Germany looking for colonies would lead to a confrontation with France and the UK. To face France and the UK, Germany decided to build a military navy that would increase tensions with the UK, and that would participate to what triggered World War I. I'm concluding on this. Germany above all. It may be we want to create a single country called Germany above all. Our prime goal is to have one Germany. In that case, it's Germany before anything else. But once it's done, you still have Germany above all, but that may be above all in the world. You see, über alles in der Welt, it's an ambiguous proclamation. Okay? It's exactly, in French, I mean, when you say moi d'abord, it can mean two things. It can mean that you take care of yourself first, right? Or you want to pass before anybody else, right? And that's exactly the same with nationalism. I want you to understand this. This is why nationalism is seen as a very critical way of thinking. It can create as much unity as confrontation. Okay, it's a way to create a community which can be exclusive and aggressive to some point. Okay, right? Is that clear? Is that clear? Please do not hesitate to tell me if you don't think it's clear, right? There are many names, there are many facts, many dates. Now, have you sent me one, Rita? Have you sent me one? Because I've answered people with their keyshow and key term. Oh yeah, I'll check. Maybe I've not sent you a message actually, but I will look at this and let you know. Yes, no problem. I will do that just after this class. I have a gap, so I will just look at this. Sorry, I've not paid attention. That's my bad. Okay, I will do that. Right, now, for the last 15 minutes, let's see what was Napoleon's III role in all this. Because Napoleon III has played a role in the unification of Italy and the unification of Germany. I'm just getting rid of a few documents. Sorry for this. I will keep that one. Okay. So I'm back to the third. I'm back to my structure, to my structure of the lesson, and this is. I hope it's working. No, sorry for this. It's part 3. Part 3 of the first chapter of the first. It's paragraph 3 of the first part. Sorry, my bad. It's there. Sorry again. Here we are. Okay. That's it. Good. Right. Just a very short aparté. As you know, we've got new programs, new syllabuses this year, and all the history syllabus is very French-centered. And so in every single lesson we have to see, and what about France? What about France? In many of my lessons, I will insist on what about the UK too, because it's in a British section. But actually, in this case, I think the French case is quite interesting. I will discuss more the UK in the second and third parts, but in this case, the French case is very interesting because, as you know, certainly know, in 1848 we had this French Revolution that put an end to the monarchy, Louis Philippe, okay, la monarchie de Juillet, and was replaced by a republican regime. And the republican regime would actually last for only 4 years before Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, the president of the French Republic, would restore an empire. And what is quite interesting is that Napoleon III was much involved in what was happening in Europe at that time. So it's part 3, France, imperial restoration, and the impact on French foreign policies. To work on this, I just need to make a short reminder of Napoleon III as a... Sorry, my bad. As Napoleon III as a... let's say as a leader. Okay. Let me present you with Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. Louis Napoleon Bonaparte is Napoleon I, nephew. When Napoleon, let me tell you a bit of biographical elements for you to understand who he was and why he acted the way he did. So, of course, when Napoleon was had to exile, he was forced to leave in 1814, and then he came back for something called the 100 Days, something called le vol de l'aigle or les 100 jours, when he restored his power. And then he was eventually defeated in Waterloo, and he had to exile away from France. And monarchy was restored. That's 1815. All Bonaparte's family, the emperor's family, had to exile. So he exiled to Germany, Augsburg, and then to Italy. And that's very important. In Italy, as a young man, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, he had a lot of acquaintances with young Italian nationalists, which means that in his youth, in his early days as an adult, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte was in favor of nations in Europe. If you prefer, he totally rejected the Congress of Vienna, right? He totally rejected the role of emperors and kings and so on. He thought, that's his early days, right? His youth and early adulthood days. He thought that priority should be given to people and nations. He also was very interested in the fate of the workers. So clearly, in the first half of the 19th century, to say differently, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte was really on the left wing of the political field. He came back to France, where he started acting in the political field, and in 1848 he was a candidate to become the president of the newly proclaimed republic. Okay, if you remember, in 1848 you had the revolution, the monarchy ended, and republic was proclaimed. Elections were organized, and he was elected for a 4-year mandate. Why was he elected? Because firstly, he had this reputation of being in favor of workers, because he had this reputation of having, a rather liberal vision. He also had the aura of being the descendant of Napoleon, who still was very popular among many people in France, especially maybe in the countryside and in the little bourgeoisie, in the petit bourgeoisie. So he was elected as a president. And immediately he had to take a decision, because as the president of France, he was confronted to the European spring of nations. He was confronted to the European spring of nations and the first movements in Italy. And when there was a movement in Italy to take Rome and proclaim a republic in Rome, actually, France decided to support the Pope more than the Republicans in Italy. And that means that he changed his mind compared to what he had believed before. Before being president, he would certainly have supported the people in Italy willing to proclaim a republic in Rome. And now he was not supporting it. Why? Because as the leader of France, he was trying to favor the balance of powers. But once he proclaimed an emperor, so he made a coup. He made a coup in December 1851. Okay, and 1 year later, he self-proclaimed the emperor of France. The republic was abolished, and he decided to go back to his pro-Italian policy. That's something I've already told you. He made Cavour the prime minister of the Kingdom of Sardinia, and they signed a deal. And the deal they signed was, if there is a war against Austria, Italy will be able to gain territories. So this war happened in 1859. I've already explained this, so I'm not going to repeat all this, right? To re-explain all this. It's already said. Louis-Napoleon Bonaparte, now Napoleon III, supported Italy against Austria. And this is what enabled Italy to gain Lombardy, for example, and to start its unification. But because in France you had a lot of Catholics that were willing to protect the Pope, France refused to let the Italians take Rome. And Napoleon III let French troops in Rome. He left French troops in Rome to protect the Pope. And that means that Italy could not be united because they still had to take Rome. Okay? So that proved that when Napoleon III was young, he was only defending the national feeling. When he became emperor, of course, he had other motivations, protecting the interest of France first. Finally, in 1866, when Austria was defeated by Germany, Napoleon III served as a negotiator between Germany, Austria, and Italy. And this is how the province of Venice was finally attached to Italy, because Napoleon negotiated with the Austrians to say, now you should let Venice be Italian again. And that's my last point for today. So globally, Napoleon III remained pro-Italian, but he was much more careful. He was trying not to attack the Pope directly. He was trying not to attack the Austrians directly. He was just willing to achieve Italian unity and support Italian unity without losing the French interest. Also remember, by supporting the Italian unity, he obtained Nice and Savoy to be attached to France. Now the final point is, why was there a war? Why was there a war between France and Prussia in 1870? A war that Napoleon III lost. Because of Spain. Now that's a complicated affair, right? In Spain, there was a question of who should become king. And the man who was about to become king was from the Hohenzollern family, and the Hohenzollern family was the family of the King of Prussia. And Napoleon III feared that France might be surrounded by Prussia and Germany in the west, and Spain in the east, and Spain in the south that would be pro-German. So that created tensions that eventually led, I'm not telling you all the story because it's a bit complicated, but that eventually led to Napoleon III declaring war to Prussia. And this war was lost. Napoleon III had to abdicate. Republic was proclaimed in France, and the Republic signed the defeat, and Alsace and a part of Lorraine had to go to Germany. So it means that Napoleon III was victim. I mean, he made a. I'm not saying he had no responsibility, but he was the victim of the German unification. Actually, he was trapped by Bismarck. Bismarck used Napoleon because he knew that even if the Germans did not agree to all unite, because there still was resistance in Germany to unite Germany. Even if there was resistance in Germany to unite, a war against France was a good motivation for all Germans to unite. So Bismarck said, let's unite against France because we need to defeat Napoleon III. And actually that's the reason why the German unity was proclaimed. The reason why the German unity was proclaimed in Versailles is because there wouldn't have been this German unity. There wouldn't have been a German Reich. There wouldn't have been a German Reich without Alsace and Lorraine, and without all the nations of Germany united against France. Now you can see why France was eager to recover the territories, and why in 1914, when World War I started, one key motivation, not the only one, but one key motivation for France was to recover its sovereignty over Alsace and Lorraine, and to take revenge from the 1870 humiliation. The humiliation of falling in the trap of Bismarck, getting into war, the humiliation of being defeated militarily by the Germans, the humiliation of having Paris occupied by the Germans, the humiliation of leaving Alsace and Lorraine to the Germans. World War I would be a way to wash this humiliation. Okay? And so this is where we will find back the national feeling. It's not a national feeling of just living together, it's the national feeling of washing national pride of humiliation. That was stained by humiliation. Okay? Right, time's up. So, to put it in a nutshell, you can see that neither Italian unity nor German unity were people willing to live together and gathering and creating communities of culture and so on. It existed. There was a feeling of a common belonging, common culture, common history. But what enabled these common feelings together was globally violence and diplomacy. To say differently, nationalism was more an instrument for political building than the real reason why you had this building. Okay? So, none of the movements were bottom-up movements. None of the movements were bottom-up movements. They all were top-down movements, like a king, a prince, an emperor, willing to unite a territory and using the national feeling, which existed, which was real, okay, which existed to serve their aims. And we can see it because that's exactly the way Germany would unite the Germans against France, against Napoleon III's France, to achieve unity. or to say differently, the German unity was the fruit of a war against France. And you see here how instrumental this has been. Okay? Right. Next time we study more, we will move more on internal and domestic questions, how democracy spread in both France and the UK, and how this phenomena of having more democratic regimes change society too. Okay, that will be for next time. Okay, there might be some questions. So some questions about the mock orals. Okay, I started a planning, but the planning is still, I'm sorry to say, there will be mock orals, but there's no way I can give you date as long as I don't know three things. Will we go back to school? If we don't go back to school, if we go back to school, I mean, then we'll organize possibly mock orals with real marks. Because if we go back to school, we can evaluate you. So that's the first point. If we don't go back to school, what will be the duties of the teachers? That is, will we still have to maintain distant learning and so on? Because as long as I do distant learning, it makes oraling a bit more complicated, because I spend a lot of time doing this, which is fine. I like it, but that means it makes mock oral more complicated. Thirdly, another element, will you have French orals or not? Because if you have French orals, maybe you will need more times to prepare for them. And so, I mean, you see, it's not that I don't want to do them. I'm absolutely ready to do that. But next week, we have all the official meetings in the school to prepare the reprise, okay, to prepare going back to actual schooling, whether it's distant or present schooling. As long as I have no information on this, it's hard to plan things which can vary. My view is that as much as possible, you will be oraled. You will have mock orals. Because not to give you marks for this year, but to prepare for next year. Because next year, you know what? Next year, there will be a back whatever. Even if we have to lock down, they will organize the back so as for it to happen. So we need to prepare for this. So yes, there will be mock orals. The question is will they be evaluated officially? I don't know. How can we organize them? Will it be in the school or by distant oraling? I don't know. And you know what? I really would like to, because the situation is getting on everybody's nerves. Like, where should we go now? So if decisions could be taken, like real ones, not, maybe we could do that and that could be great. I'm a poor, humble, down on the line public servant. I don't know more than you. Okay, that's the problem actually for if we are organizing things like this. Okay, so regarding the next lessons, I know that the 1st of May was International Workers' Day, so there was no reason we should work. But the problem is that if we don't meet on next Friday, we won't meet on next week neither, because on Monday 11th we've got a meeting. And then the rest of the week I'm oraling the troisième that want to enter the international section, which means that there won't be a class on next week. So if we don't have a class on next Friday, I know it's a holiday, but on next Friday we won't meet before possibly 15 days. And that will leave you some time to forget everything. So if you're okay with that, I would like to teach 1 hour on next Friday, so we can do something like from 11 to 12. I know it's a holiday, but I will be there. And I think it's better, okay, if we can like have 1 hour on next Friday, 11 to 12. Okay? I will send you a message for this. I've seen that you wanted the document. You wanted to have the documents, is that you say? Yes. So I will put this on Moodle, all the documents we've seen, the maps and so on, but not immediately, but I will do that this evening, right? Okay. People, I'm done. I think you have a French class. at some point. So enjoy this. And so see you on Friday, 11, right? See you. Bye-bye.